Hello friends, and welcome to my first TBR video. If you're new here, my name is Amanda. I'm an aspiring author working on my first novel, a vampiric horror comedy set in coastal Maine that I'm currently calling Project Crimson. On this channel, I post a lot of writing content, writing vlogs, and just other things I find interesting that are inspiring my work. And today I thought we would talk books, take a little break from the vlogs, and go over my current TBR list. I just got done with some breakfast and a little gardening session, if you know, you know, and made myself this banana coffee, which this is amazing. So one thing about me, I love watching those videos on TikTok where people go into Japanese convenience stores or Korean convenience stores and sit there and make coffee drinks. And we have a new Asian market that just opened up, and we went there the other day and they had the banana milk. So I bought some to try and I made myself this banana latte, and 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Do recommend. Anyway, I've always been more of a book buyer than a book reader. I read really slow, but we're trying to make it more of a priority this year, especially because I'm working on my own project. So I've strategically put this list together. Some of them are fiction, some are nonfiction, and some are writing craft books. They all are in some way made to help my work. So each one will talk about why I picked it, why I think it's interesting, and how it's going to help me with my book or relate to my novel. We're trying to read more books this year because when you read more, you become a better writer. So, kicking it off, we're gonna start with nonfiction because there's only one. I'm not going to go into it really. It's pretty self-explanatory. It is Surviving Autocracy by Masha Gessen. I'm probably gonna butcher a lot of these names. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into this, but if you know, you know why I'm reading this. Next, we're going to get into writing craft books. These are very important, I think, especially as someone who's really new to writing and hasn't had a writing class since college. I think these two books are really gonna help me with story structure and just like general mindset when it comes to being a writer. The first one, if you watch any AuthorTube at all, you're going to be very familiar with. It is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. This is a book. It started out as a guide for screenwriting that they've adapted into novel writing. I just started the first chapter and I'm going to be using this to kind of go over my story outline and go through this beat sheet and just try to make sure my story's hitting the right beats and parts it needs to have for story arcs. When I started my project, I had to have a beginning point and an end point, but as far as getting there is where I'm having the trouble. So I think this is really gonna help a lot. Very excited to get into this more. I've started a little bit of annotation on this already. Like I said, I started getting into the first chapter the other day, but I think this is really gonna help me a lot with story structure and making sure I'm doing what I need to be doing to have a successful story. The next book I have for writing craft is Stephen King on Writing. Stephen King to me is one of the greatest authors ever. He's one of the best horror writers ever. I grew up in Maine, so he's also just been a very big cultural impact on me. My mom actually used to be a cashier for his family when I was little, growing up in the 90s, which is just kind of cool. So I'm just excited to read this and kind of get into his brain a little bit and see kind of how he got to where he is today. If you don't know, which you should, Stephen King is an extremely fast writer. He's put out I don't even know how many books. And yeah, this I think is just gonna be really interesting. I think it gets into more of like his personal life and how he became a writer. And I think this is just gonna be just really interesting to kind of dive into and learn more about him and how he got started and how he thinks up all the really interesting, awesome, crazy things that he thinks of. I think he's one of the greatest storytellers, and some people may disagree, but he holds a place in my heart. So those are the two books that I have lined up for craft related books. If anybody in the comments has suggestions for others that are good, I'd really appreciate it. And now we'll get into the fiction or the fun stuff. I do sort of have these in order by which one I want to read first, but it's not like super set in stone or anything. All these books I'm really excited to read. The first book is Carmilla. This is a very, very old book. It came out before Dracula. It's female vampire. It's by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. This one's the edited version by Carmen Machado. I heard this is like the best copy right now to have. It's a beautiful book. I love the cover. The inside has all these like great illustrations, which is super fun. My main protagonist in my novel is a female vampire, so I think this will be really good. And just reading the book that came before Dracula and inspired Dracula is also just going to be really fun to get into. Also, if you haven't read this yet, I do recommend picking up this copy because it is beautiful, and like I said, it's illustrated, so that's super fun. Can't show that one because it's got a naked lady in there. There, gorgeous, super fun. I also love this book because, like I said, it's illustrated and it's kind of giving me some ideas for what I could potentially do with mine. One of these things I think is really interesting, that rather than keeping the illustrations on one page, they go over and spill into the next page and kind of wrap around the text, which I do really enjoy and I think is really interesting. So I just love that. I even love this illustrator and the fine lines they use in here. So I'll be definitely looking at that to gain some inspiration. That one's gonna be first. It's real short. That's why I picked it for the first one. I'm still reading Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix right now. I'm a little more than halfway done with that. So after I finish that, I'm gonna dive into this. Once I finish Carmilla, the next one I have up on deck is Diavola. If you pay attention to BookTube or Book Talk at all, this might have come across a few times. I know I saw quite a few people talking about it. That's why I picked it up. I'm really into like gothic horror. I love this cover. It looks spooky. It looks very horror. It looks very gothic. I'm a big fan. They've got comparisons to the White Lotus, which I recently just binged the first 2 seasons of White Lotus. If you haven't watched it, what are you doing? It's so good. I haven't started the 3rd season yet, and I've already heard that it's not as good, so that's unfortunate, but White Lotus is awesome. This book, it says it's a sly, wickedly funny vacation gothic. And how fun is that? Basically, this family goes on vacation and they are in a haunted villa. So super fun. And this one also says, imagine The Exorcist meets The Haunting of Hill House. So yeah, this is gonna be really good, I think. I'm very excited to read this. It's got haunted houses, it's got villas. It has a warning in the cover and it says, warning, may invoke feelings of irritation, dread, and despair that come with large family gatherings. That's too funny. That's too funny. So that's next up. Also pretty short. So I figured I could probably get through these 2 in the same month. I know some of you watching this are like, I could get through that in a week. Like I said, I'm a very slow reader. So if I can get through both of these in 1 month, I'll be very happy with myself. Speaking of Grady Hendrix, the next book I have is a Grady Hendrix novel. It is My Best Friend's Exorcism. I originally fell in love with the cover of this. I am obsessed with this book. It's giving 80s VHS, and it is so cool. It is literally made to look like a VHS tape, which I think is just the coolest thing. It's got the little stickers on it. It's got the Be Kind Rewind. I am obsessed. Obsessed. My book, I've described it as a horror comedy set in the 80s, and I think this right here, this book is going to be like the blueprint. I do not know how to write horror. I do not know how to write comedy. And I didn't live in the 80s. I lived in the 90s. So I think this will be very helpful for me. Let me read the back to you just a little bit here. It says, high school sophomores Abby and Gretchen have been best friends since 4th grade, but after an evening of skinny dipping goes disastrously wrong, Gretchen begins to act different. She's moody, she's irritable, and bizarre incidents keep happening whenever she's nearby. Abby's investigation leads her to some startling discoveries, and by the time their story reaches its terrifying conclusion, the fate of Abby and Gretchen will be determined by a single question. Is their friendship powerful enough to beat the devil? So fun. It says it's like the unholy hybrid of Beaches and The Exorcist. My best friend's exorcism blends teen angst, adolescent drama, unspeakable horrors, and a mix of 80s pop signs into a pulse-pounding supernatural thriller. So excited for this. Love it. Obsessed with it. Haven't even read it yet. I don't know. This is so cool to me. It's so cool to me that it looks like a VHS tape. Yeah, I just think this book is going to be so much fun, and I cannot wait to get into this. Very, very excited. Next up, another book that I just kind of fell in love with the cover. I'm a very visual person. I've always been this way. Even when I was a kid, my family would take our outings, things that we did to do as like bond with a family, is go to Borders Books and go buy books. And every time I went to Borders, I just would go pick out whatever cover spoke to me. And I've always been that way. So this is another book that the cover just really stood out. I love it. It's The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. And again, I'm probably butchering that. Beautiful, beautiful cover. Black sprayed edges. It's giving witchy. It's beautiful. This book, I have not read Ninth House, but I know she's really famous for that. This one I was going to read first because this just seems very much up my alley. The inside of this, can we just appreciate that for a second? Those are pomegranates. Ugh, obsessed. It's just very much giving the vibes that I want. And this novel is set in the Spanish Golden Age. It's just gonna be really fun to like get in that setting, I think. One show I really did enjoy was A Discovery of Witches, and a lot of that was in that older time period in Europe, and I really enjoyed that setting. So I'm hoping this gives a little bit of that. This is in a shabby house on a shabby street in the new capital of Madrid. Luisa Cotado uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion. I'm gonna assume that means like a maid or something. Determined to seize this once chance to better her fortunes, Luisa plunges into a world of seers and alchemists, holy men and hucksters, where the lines between magic, science, and fraud are never certain. It's got war, it's got magic, it's got all kinds of death and just darkness, and yeah. Beautiful book. Very excited. A little different than the other ones that I have, but I think this one will help because my female main character, Celeste, she's a vampire. So she's older, and I want her to have been brought up in Victorian times by Russian immigrants. So I don't know how I'm gonna work that in, but we'll see. And the last book that I have on this TBR list is Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. Again, I picked this because the cover looked very nice to me. It reminded me of coastal Maine, and then when I opened up the jacket, it actually does take place in coastal Maine. So this is a little self-explanatory. That's where my book takes place. That's where I grew up. Anytime a book is set in Maine like that, and it's like suspenseful, or it's a haunting, or it's any paranormal, I'm going to snatch it right up. Big fan of that. And I just thought the cover was really cool because it looks like a skull. There's a person in the water and a body. And I said, what's this about? It says it's an evocative, bone-chilling read. And I think this is just going to be very fun because it is set in the Maine coast and it's about a writer. So that'll be fun. I think it's giving a little bit of Alan Wake. If you've ever played that, it's a video game about a writer whose darkness inside him manifests into these shadow people that are coming after the town and him, and he has to use his skill of writing and his storytelling to kind of rewrite the narrative and get rid of the darkness. But this writer is writing about a killer. It says, but the more Wilder writes, the less he trusts himself in his memory. He starts to see things that can't be real, notes hidden in the cottage from an old friend now dead, a woman with narc hair drowning in the icy waters below, calling for help, entire chapters he doesn't recall typing, appearing overnight. Who or what is haunting Wilder? Super interesting. Like I said, definitely reminds me of the game Alan Wake and like that whole premise of that. But again, setting is right. I think seeing how another writer is depicting the same sort of setting that I am trying to go for is going to be super helpful also. Yeah, so that is the current TBR stack. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and please leave me a comment below and let me know what you are planning on reading next, or what you're currently reading, or just what you're working on. Do leave a pine tree emoji. Thank you so much once again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.